Well, the Marines came in. We had some great warriors come in and do a fantastic job. And they were there instantaneously as soon as we heard. I use the word immediately. They came immediately, and it's in great shape. As you know, this will not be a Benghazi. Benghazi should never have happened. This will never, ever be a Benghazi. But we have some of our greatest warriors there. They got in there very quickly. As soon as we saw there was a potential for problem, they got in, and there was no problem whatsoever.
Welcome to this edition of America Talks Live. I'm Jonathan Gill. I'm filling in for my good buddy John Cardillo. We have a lot to get to on this New Year's Day edition of America Talks Live. Our top story is the protest at the U.S. Embassy in Iraq by Iranian-backed militias. That was President Trump saying he doesn't see the U.S. going to war with Iran. Trump also said that would be a bad thing for Iran. Now, this comes as the protesters at the embassy have withdrawn and left the compound. Officials said that the protesters' tents have been dismantled and Iraq security forces have secured the perimeter. These demonstrations have been going on for the last couple of days, but there were no reported deaths. Iran condemned the Trump administration for its response to the demonstration. Ayatollah Khamenei said the U.S. can't do anything and the president isn't logical. He also said the U.S. actions in Iraq are crimes and has made other nations hate the U.S. and added that the country will fight back if needed. That's where we want to bring in our panel for this. First, we have retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, a senior fellow at Defense Priorities. We also have another retired Army Colonel, Kurt Schlichter. And I feel just like I did when I was a junior officer in the SEAL teams, trying to brief or give information to the colonels. So this could be a little intimidating for me.
So I haven't been briefed in the 5 years to the day that I retired, so I'm looking forward to it.
So let me start off with this. When we look at the reality of what's happening over there with this protest, I guess you want to call it, how bad does it look for us that this was even able to muster up enough energy to cause a reaction by us? How does this happen in one of, if not the greatest missions or embassies that we've ever created in a war zone? Daniel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I think that this just, to the American people, this ought to be the last straw that we see before we say we need our troops to come home, because certainly this is not the result of anything that the Americans failed to do or anything. I mean, this was the Iraqi people, especially those who are part of the Hashd al-Shaabi and some of the other Shia militia who stormed the embassy. And you can't prevent someone from storming the embassy. But this underscores the reasons why this happened were because we had our troops attacked on a base in Kirkuk. We had several other bases attacked as well, but that's where we lost some life. And then we responded. And then they didn't like that. Of course, we killed many of the people, wounded 50 more. And they, of course, they're promising to retaliate against other troops in the area. None of this is necessary because we don't have any more national security issues in the area, and our troops there don't protect us. And if our troops are not there to protect us, then we bring them home. And right now, all we do by having them there is to continue to put targets on their backs and potentially get us drawn into a larger conflict, which we don't need.
Kurt, how do you think? What do you think? What's your feelings there?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. Look, this is an information operation. This is not a tactical operation. They weren't trying to grab the embassy. They were trying to grab headlines and empower the political opposition to Donald Trump back home to attack him, which, of course, like the suckers they are, they did. I mean, you can always count on the liberal Democrats to side with America's enemies. I mean, that's kind of a tradition. I think Donald Trump turned it around. Donald Trump's forceful response, saying out a QRF of Marines, quick reaction force of 100 Marines, and then sending in an airborne battalion with 2 more battalions on the way. I mean, that's a potent message. And I think Americans are happy to see it. I think Americans are happy to see what's going on here.
Yeah, and I also think it's very interesting when you have I think it's very interesting that you have a president who it's New Year's Eve and into the new year. He's having a big gala, and he's still able to officially handle this properly, which is completely different than what happened in 2012 in Benghazi at a much smaller venue. And we lost, so many incredible Americans. Here's the next question I want to go to you, Daniel, about. Do we really have a place over there, or is this a State Department war that we're over there in, where the State Department is trying to collect information, or they're running their whatever that they do? I'm not even sure what it is that the State Department and the CIA are doing that keeps the DOD in this area anymore.
Well, you really hit all the nails on the head with one time there. That's exactly the problem. When these troops were first sent in there, I've argued that they weren't needed to be sent in by Obama back in the beginning of late 2014, and then he's the one that sent the 5,000 back in there. I argued at the time that should have been Baghdad's job. That should have been Damascus's job to get rid of the direct threat to their regimes in ISIS. But we went in there and we ended up doing, pretty good. And then when Trump came in, he increased that. And then we, definitely drove ISIS out of both Raqqa and Mosul. Now, at that time, that's when we should have redeployed our forces, because there was no more military mission for us to continue doing. Our troops there were there for the benefit of the regime in Baghdad. I mean, you just got to be honest and call it what it is. We were there to protect them. If we're not there to protect our interests, then we need to come out, because right now that is the big problem with the troops that were wounded and killed the other day. Because what is their mission there? Why are we in Kirkuk? Why are we in Taji? Why are we in these other places when our security is not at threat here? This is something that the Baghdad regime, they've got to figure out their own security for themselves. And of course, they're having a lot of problems with their own political situation, where there was lots of protests for the last couple of months against the regime in Baghdad because they're too friendly with Iran. And they were probably happy to have the headlines shifted off of that and put onto us for this period of time. But we need to put it back where it belongs, and they've got to deal with this, not the American military.
So, Kurt, do you think it's possible, now the president has sent over this massive group of soldiers over there to back up the Marines? We're going to have now over 4,000 people there. Could this be the time when he just says, hey, let's pack things up and go and leave?
Well, look, here's the thing. Since all of us were 01, since we were all lieutenants or ensigns or whatever we were, one thing was beaten into our heads. What's the objective? What's the mission? What do we need to accomplish? Can anybody tell me what we're doing in Iraq? I asked the question about Syria. What are we doing in Syria? What's the end state we're fighting towards? Same thing in Afghanistan. It's weird. I'm a graduate of the Army War College. All they talked about was the disaster that follows when you don't have an objective. And now we've had 3 major operations going. I like to think I'm a pretty well-informed cat. I have no idea what our objective is. I have no idea what the ideal end state is. I have no idea what we're asking young paratroopers from Omaha, Nebraska to potentially give their lives to achieve. And that's wrong. Give me an objective, or get my boys out.
What a great
way. Especially when they're now being sent in to protect them, and they're in an environment where they don't have a mission. And that was the thing that I wanted to ask you both as the cleanup question here is, did we even have a strategic plan from the beginning? Because from the very beginning, they have not named the enemy. They call them radical Islam, or they call them Al-Qaeda or ISIS. But the reality is, and I think the American people, or at least half the American people, are starting to see this, but it is one enemy. And it doesn't really matter if they're Sunni or Shia, or if they're in the Middle East, or if they're outside of London, or if they're doing attacks here. We have, first and foremost, never named the enemy.
Well,
how can you have a strategic attack? How can you have a strategic plan if you haven't even named the enemy?
Well, like I said,
Go ahead, Daniel.
Sorry, I was going to say I could not more strongly agree with virtually every word out of your other guest there. That was great stuff, because that is the absolute core issue basis. I mean, they're dying every month in Afghanistan, and there's no mission for them to even accomplish. They're just conducting tactical tasks and dying along the way, and that needs to end, because our security, this is the critical part, our security is not at risk that our redeployment would increase, because we're not kept safe by the troops that are in Syria and in Iraq and Kirkuk and whatever. That doesn't do anything to help our security. So we need to pull the military troops out, because we keep ourselves safe from our powerful global ISR strike capability, where we can strike anywhere on the globe, as we did with the Baghdadi raid in Syria when our interests are threatened. And we don't need troops stationed there to be able to do that. So it is time to bring them home.
Kurt, you got about 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Here's the key point. Our guys will go out and they will die if we ask them. They will put their lives on the line without asking what the overall strategic objective is. That's our responsibility as American citizens. The military is a creature of the civilian government. The civilian government is a creature of us, the American voters. And until we demand that we not put our people at risk, unless there is a clear, achievable objective that we can adequately resource, then we shouldn't do it, period.
Wholeheartedly. Here's what's interesting. There's three of us, right? I was a junior officer. You all were colonels, lieutenant colonel. We're not generals. We're not the people at the very, very top that we're always told have more information than we do, and don't question that information when you're in. But I don't know where they're getting their information, because everything we just did in 10 minutes, we basically solved the issue.
Right.
Absolutely. By the basic
fellas,
application of standard military principles. Objective, commander's intent, boom.
Well
we don't
said.
have
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Kurt, thank you for your time today. Daniel, please stick around. And gentlemen, thank you both for your service, and have an incredible new year.
Same to you.
Happy New
You got
Year
it.
for me.
We'll be right back when we have more on the end of the protests in the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. America Talks Live continues right after the break.